Morning. Welcome to Radio 702.
Good morning, Tshidi.
Thank you
Good
so much.
morning, listeners.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start this conversation not even about you, Jay. I want to go far, far back. I know you were born in Alex, if I'm correct. No, you weren't. She's shaking her head already. But I do know that you also had some upbringing in Mpumalanga. Were you actually born in Mpumalanga and not in Alex?
We were all born in Mpumalanga because my grandmother lived there in Witbank, Kwakuqa.
What was that like? Let's speak about that. I always find it fascinating when you go to other provinces or when you travel, even outside, how different even the cities are from one another, the provinces are from one another. And obviously there's this time and space issue where growing up at a different time is completely different from growing up in our era. What was that like for you? What do you cherish? What do you remember? What's the nostalgia like when you look back at your time in Mpumalanga?
I think that what I always remember about childhood is that there were much fewer people in South Africa. People forget that when I was growing up, there were only about 18 million people in South Africa.
Yeah, compared to the 60 now, yeah.
To about 6, more, yeah. So it's but also I think something to remember is that a lot of, for African people in South Africa, a lot of them can't go back to where they were born and grew up because those places don't exist anymore because of the Group Areas Act. So a lot of people were displaced, so yes. the line of history was broken up. When I came back from exile in 1990, my brother said, let's drive to Witbank because we still have relatives there. So we went there to see them. And for one thing, my grandmother's house was not there because in the old location, people had houses that they had built for themselves. And each house was different. And the population was less. You knew everybody. Everybody knew you. And when I walked down the street, people remembered my mother walking to school, and this is not the case now in South Africa that, people talk about community, but our communities have really been broken because everybody is new and sometimes people don't even know who their neighbors are, So a child walking down the street is just a child walking by itself along the street. So I remember open spaces, and I remember that the aeroplane was a big thing because in those days people didn't take a flight to Durban or Cape Town or PE or Polokwane. They took the train, and it took a long time. And so what I remember also is the goods train. Which was on top of the village at the end of the township, and carrying coal to Mozambique, and goods to other parts of southern Africa. I remember that my grandmother was a tavern keeper. I don't like to call it a shebeen because I think it's a new word, It
also has a lot of negative connotations.
Yeah.
Shebeen versus
tavern. Absolutely. But she brewed beer like other older women who did not want to do washing or cleaning in white people's homes. So she was a businesswoman, and she had a tavern, and so we had people coming in every evening to have a drink. And my grandmother was very strict. And there were different types of taverns. Some things where people were really getting down, listening to music, and so on. Women were not, young women, my grandmother did not allow them in our tavern because we had a lot of minors coming in. And she was always listening to the conversation and telling people, don't go there. I've got a child. I'm raising a child here. And when the conversation went into things that a child should not listen to. Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of that now.
Yeah.
I want to speak a little bit now about your journey into the struggle, so to speak. When did you realize that life as you knew it isn't what life could be? That there is some subjugation that's happening, that the opportunities that are there for your mother and all the other women are quite limited. You spoke about those who didn't want to do the washing. They had taverns and the likes. When did you realize that there's a limitation, that there's something about the country where opportunities are not equal?
I think people ask that a lot, and I think it's an interesting question because I think for my generation, we came out of a situation where our parents had been to boarding schools, missionary schools,
Yes.
like Bo Inkamane, Kilnaton, they were
My
well
dad went
known,
to
Marian
Kilnaton, yes.
Hill. I, for instance, was sent to Inanda Girls Seminary
Yes.
in Natal. So, we came from that not first, but maybe they were the third or fourth generation of educated people. They were all teachers, nurses, lawyers, a few lawyers, fewer doctors, and priests. Those were the areas in which you could follow a profession, and they were respected in the township. And I think I tell people that, you could not have been a South African and not understood that you were being discriminated against. Because conversations were about people arrested for passes going to jail, people arrested for not paying poll tax, people had exemptions, but police, there was already a kind of pre-stage before the formal apartheid. Apartheid took place in my childhood when I was about 7. In 1948, I was 7 years old. So apartheid came. Everybody was talking about the new regime
You couldn't
that
escape
was
it.
going to, and everybody was talking about the Afrikaners and so forth, and we knew about Mandela, we knew about Sisulu, because the political parties in South Africa at the time were legal. They were meeting openly, and it is when they intensified their work because of the intensified repression that, only around 1960 that the ANC, for instance, and PAC were banned.
Me, Barbara, I have a song list. You spoke about how you asked about your favorite songs. I have a song list with me. I want to play some of your favorite songs for our listeners. I see your brother is also listed here. Tshidi Madia is also here somewhere. How do you want us to pick the songs that you want us to play? Do you want to pick a song for the listeners, or should I pick a song and then you'll tell me why you like it?
You pick a song.
Ooh.
Play
Okay.
redemption song.
Oh, you've decided for us? I will
Yeah.
not say no to Bob Marley. So let's play a little bit of redemption song and she'll tell us why the song is meaningful to her.
Old pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Ooh, some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop at the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Yes, some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption songs. All I ever had, redemption songs. These songs of freedom, songs of freedom.
This is a beautiful start. This is a fantastic song choice. What comes to your mind? I'm looking at your face. You've been smiling the whole time the song has been playing. Where does your mind go when you hear Redemption Song?
You know, I always tell people that my generation, we are so lucky because we grew up in a period of continuous development, political and so on. You know, it's a period during which Africa was getting free. So every year, every 6 months, there was an African country getting free from colonialism, you know, independence. Ghana was the first.
Where the unimaginable was suddenly happening.
And we in South Africa, you know, we couldn't even imagine it, but it was something that kept us strong.
Yeah.
Because we knew that it was something that was moving all over our continent, and that at some point or other, it was going to come to South Africa. For us in South Africa, we thought that we would get freedom earlier, that we would make freedom earlier. When some of us went into exile, we didn't think that we were going to be away for decades. We thought that, in 5 years' time, 10, you know, because things were moving. There were protests. There were bus strikes. Like I grew up in Alexandra, there was the Patco bus strike, and people closed down the place and walked to town to work. You know, I grew up at a time when, you know, our people were resisting already. There was the defiance campaign, you know, and there were trials. There was the treason trial, you know, and I was a teenager then. So
the country was alive. You were lit in terms of the possibilities and what your participation should be. I know you stayed in Ghana at some point. The decision to go into exile, when did you make it? What went through your head about this being the right thing for you to do?
Well, I don't think that people made decision as such. Things happen.
You didn't sit and think through. You're like,
Because,
what is what we're
you
doing?
saw other people. Because, for instance, we had writers like Bo Ezekiel Mpahlele.
Yes.
They were leaving the country. People were Bo Arthur Maimane, Bo Bloke Mudisane. We were reading, and the press was strong. We had newspapers, the Golden City Post, Bantu World, and all those newspapers, they were writing about what was happening. So, if you lived in the urban area, and there were people like Father Trevor Huddleston,
Yes,
and
yes.
so on.
Your brother
So,
also writes about Father Huddleston,
Yeah.
Tshidi Madia in his own book.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about why the arts as a meaning of change, as a change agent. Why get
Because-
involved and work through
Yeah.
that as a
Well,
communicator?
I think that for one thing, I come from a family. My father was a sculptor. My father was a sculptor, and when I was a child in the 40s, he won prizes for his sculpture, and he was a sculptor all his life. Most artists who are in the plastic arts know about my dad, Thomas Masekela. So we grew up in a home where there were books, there was music. These things were talked about. There were books at my home about the African masks, about Picasso. My father read, Chinese philosophy. He was a very eccentric man, and he was a health inspector at the health committee in Alexandra Township. And his boss was Dr. A.B. Kluma. And the Secretary General of the ANC, Alfred Nzo,
Yes.
who was the longest standing Secretary General of the ANC, he became our first foreign minister. He worked with my father. He was a junior health inspector at the Alexandra Health Committee. So I knew people like Bo Betha Mashaba. She was later called, she got married and she was called Betha Klowa.
Yes.
Bo Florence Moposho, they were leaders of the Patco bus strike in Alex. So I grew up in that atmosphere of people saying no to apartheid, but also it was an era in which the political space was getting narrower and narrower and narrower. And, of course, it ended up with things like the 90-day detention. It ended up with things like the emergency, laws and so on, and people being arrested. And slowly, and then, of course, by 1960, the political organizations, liberation movements were banned. The ANC was banned. The PAC was banned. People were in jail. Yeah, and the space was closed up completely,
Yeah,
almost.
so you had to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, so I don't understand under those circumstances, how don't you become political? How don't you get affected?
Some people are asking that question today.
Yeah.
But I'm going to speak to you about that. How do you not see where the country is or not want to do something when you even listen to somebody like Mayor Barbara Masekela? She's telling you what the atmosphere is like. Doesn't she draw you in? Don't you want to just sit and just listen to what they lived through, her eyes, a perspective of this country and what this freedom is? I'm seeing a lot of WhatsApps and voice notes for you. I'm going to come to all of you, I promise. A lot of people are thankful for the sacrifices. Today, and it's important that we're speaking to you today because it's also been 32 years since Chris Hani was assassinated. When you look back at the sacrifices, do you ever pause and go, it was worth it? Or other times when you look at the way we handle our democracy, our freedom, and think, these people have no idea what it's taken. Are there regrets about the sacrifices to get us to where we are?
No, I don't think that one can ever regret. And I think that first of all, I want to be very clear that things are not the way they were during apartheid.
Yes.
There is a difference.
Louder. I'm here.
I mean,
They're here.
that is where we must start, that people we did not grow up under this kind of freedom. I mean, to go to from here to Springs, let's say, or Boxback, you didn't know what would happen or whether you would see a person again, So, I mean, those are things we cannot touch. The freedom of speech, the freedom of association, but they are such important things, And I think one of the things is that we have the freedom to say, to criticize. In some countries, you can't even talk about a political leader or a president and still have supper at home,
Here they call their president cupcake. Let's speak about...
absolutely. And people go to the other extreme of being totally disrespectful.
Yes.
And not respecting, because if you do not respect the office, then that office cannot be of importance, cannot bring about the necessary changes. And I'm not saying that things are good. Yes. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we should be balanced. And I mean, the one that breaks my heart, it cuts me into two, is when people say people like Mandela and Sisulu, sold out, the country.
And that narrative comes back quite often, yes.
That narrative, it is so heartbreaking for people who did make the sacrifice. And I think people have no clue. They have no clue what it means to live in a country that discriminates against people because of their color, that, a country where people can't move around. And also we have no clue of what war means. We're loose about things, fighting, but we have no clue and I think that sometimes we should show people more what is going on in Sudan, what is going on in Palestine, and what is going on in troubled parts of the world. And I'm not saying that people should not criticize, what is going on in the country, because it is bad. Yes, we must be doing much better than we are doing, but we must also be contributing to that change. And I think that one of the key things in our country that is really missing is the question of cultural institutions, cultural education, cultural agencies. And I don't mean Market Theatre, Joburg Theatre here in town. I mean in the middle of the township.
We don't even seem to care for our archives, Barbara. But what I want to do, because a lot of people want to engage you, and I feel like I'm hogging you. I wanted to speak to you about your time in Ghana. You've lived in other places. I actually was looking at one of your books. I'm going to go to calls very soon and the WhatsApps. But I was looking at one of the books, and I couldn't figure out if is it poli, as in like flowers from, I think flower from Ghana. But you know what? I kept confusing it with pole, the Swahili, slowly. And I was like, either way, it makes sense to me. But it's poli, isn't it?
Poli, yeah.
Speak to me about your time, though, in the different countries. Where would you, in a heartbeat, with your eyes closed, go back to?
Oh, I could go back to Ghana tomorrow.
Not New York, because you've lived in so many places. Not Zambia, not Britain. Definitely Ghana.
But I could go back to Zambia. I could live in Zambia. I could go to Tanzania.
I love the East of Africa. Yeah.
I couldn't go to New York because it's changed. It's not the New York I lived in as a young girl, listening to, going to see Bob Marley, going to see Aretha Franklin, going to see Hugh Masekela, going to see Miles Davis. It's not the same New York. It's a different New York that has been sanitized, and and all the international people like Haitians and so on who lived in Manhattan where we lived.
The melting pot
of
that area. Before I go to callers, I keep saying I'm going to go to callers. I'm going to get into trouble with the listeners. Being abroad and being allowed to be naughty or experiencing something completely different with your brother, I don't think that's an experience that one can put money on a prize on, right? Exploring something new with your brother. Just quickly touching on, because you said to me earlier, she said to me, "Oh, of course they ask about Tshidi Madia. Of course they'll ask about a brother.
And
Of
I
course they'll ask
love
about
it. I
Mandela."
love
Do you
it
love it when we
because
bring up your
I
brother?
love it
Fantastic.
that people ask about my brother, that they ask about Mandela, that because those people, their lives, they are alive now.
In this moment,
Because
in this
their
conversation,
works
yeah.
are still nurturing us,
Absolutely. They
And so,
absolutely
and
feed
I
us.
think it's right that people should ask about them, and it's right that we should speak about them. And there are hundreds of others, you know,
That must be celebrated.
but
Absolutely.
we know, but there are many, many South Africans who have put this country on the map and who are products of this very imperfect country, which we must work to make it better.
Absolutely. I'm gonna play you a few voice notes. I'm hoping for to put in a call, but let me start with the voice notes. Hear what some of the people, some of the listeners want to say to you. Please take a listen. Do you have headphones on? Please put on the headphones so you can listen to what people are saying to you and what questions they're putting to you. All right, Abel.
Good morning, Siri. My question to Me Barbara is that looking at South Africa today, can she proudly say that there is freedom in this country? The freedom that she and other veterans went to exile to fight for. Thank you very much, Peter Maida Machaba from Leswaga.
Sid, I trust you well. Thanks for bringing in Barbara Masekela. Like her brother, Upra Hugh, I can listen to both of them the whole day. Very fascinating. Whenever they speak, you get a sense that these people do understand what life is about, the politics, the social construct issues. They very fascinating. And then thanks for bringing her in. Thanks, Sidi.
Thank you. It is such a treat for me as well. Thank you so much for that. Nicholas and Santon, you also wanted to speak to me, Barbara?
Yeah, thanks very much, Sidi. I remember probably 10 years ago when I was a chief of staff at the Arts and Culture. I had to approach Mayor Barbara in her retirement. And, we needed someone to lead and chair the State Theatre. I mean, that's our big one, And I remember she said to me, "Nicholas, I'm too old now, I've retired, unless you're going to help me to work with young people." Now, Sidi, at that time, it was not fashionable for anybody to really do that. And young people used to feel as if nobody was giving them any chance. And she said, "Give me young people, and then I will take on this role and chair." And we did that. We appointed a number of young people, the Tebogo Mputis and the Sylvesters, and they did a marvelous job. And I really want to thank her for this. And by the way, she certainly celebrated birthday with a number of famous people, the Madibas, the Richard Branson on the 18th of July. Thank you very much for
Your line
her
is a little bit
contribution.
choppy.
Thank you very much for her contribution, Sidi.
All right, thank you so much, Nicholas. I don't know if you want to say anything. You can speak. He can hear you as well, me, Barbara. I think I've just lost Nicholas there. What wonderful memories and the importance of bringing young people along the journey. That's what he's flagging there. A lot of young people now look at arts and think that it is a demotion. Often, when a minister is given arts, they feel that minister is politically on the outskirts, the demotion. It's almost refreshing when you watch somebody like Gayton, who seems to be excited there. Young people feel that they're forgotten in the art space. Your thoughts about the work that you've done before, the importance of elevating young people in that area as well?
Well, I think that culture, has to do with the life of the people, and I think that one way where I am very, very critical of our government, and I blame myself too, is that we do not have cultural institutions where the people are. And I am not talking about celebrity culture. I'm talking about community centers everywhere where people learn how to swim, how to play sports, how to play musical instruments, where there is a counselor who can help them with, help certain people with their problems, social problems. We just do not have those institutions. And as a result, we have impoverished our whole cultural industry because we do not have places where we are creating future artists, future audiences, etc., etc.
I hope the ministers listen. That. Me, Barbara. So that was your brother. That's Tshidi Madia and the Union of South Africa. The song is called Caution. Where do you go when you hear that trumpet, that famous trumpet? Where does your head go? Does your heart remember him?
I think that, perhaps what I should say is that through the many years that one was in exile, one was always at home. And if you listen to the music or you read the books or you listen to the poetry, what you get, or you look at the art, what you get is that people were in South Africa. They may have been living abroad, but
they were home.
this is what inspired some of the greatest art,
The driving force.
if you think about our great musician Miriam Makeba, she was inspired by this country. And it is something that is precious. Our country is so precious for us. And it continues. It should be an inspiration for us.
Before I'm running out of time. I know you complained about the ads. I'm definitely running out of time. But it would be remiss of me if I don't speak about UJ honoring you for your work. And then what is that like for you, where universities, that tradition, I mean, this is Rao. This used to be Rao. The Rand Afrikaans University at some point would have never seen and
it's a
recognized who you are.
sign of the transformation that has taken place, because the University of Johannesburg, that honored me with an honorary degree, was Rao, as you say, the Rand Afrikaans University, and today it is a fully fledged South African university for everybody, and one of the biggest and one of the best. And incidentally, we also have at UJ, at least UJ has, I'm a writing fellow at UJ, at the Johannesburg Institute of Advanced Studies. And through UJ, we were able this year, for the third time, we have a Johannesburg Festival of Women Writers.
Oh, that's
and
exciting.
it is one of the most successful and inspiring, projects, where you see women from all walks of life coming in for 2 days just to learn how to write, to talk about books, to sell books, to promote books, etc.
I want to do that. That sounds exciting. Unfortunately, time is not on my side.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to kind of wrap it at that point. Thank you so much for joining us. I need more of this conversation, that I know for sure. Let's take a quick break.
Hanging out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.